After 2 long years, we have finally gotten another look at the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. They wrapped up the E3 Nintendo Direct with this trailer being the last game of the presentation and the only one with an unannounced release date. While the trailer was pretty short, and they didn't really show off too much, there were still a lot of secrets, hidden details, and Easter eggs worth pointing out and talking about that you may have missed. So let's go into this, break down some of the details in the trailer, and talk about the idea of this trailer in general. But before we get started, if you are new here, perhaps consider subscribing. We do tons of Nintendo content here on the channel and plan to do a bunch on Breath of the Wild 2 when that inevitably releases. Anyways, thanks for listening to that. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, because there's already been like a countless number of in-depth trailer, in-depth analysis and stuff, this is kind of going to be more of like a stream of conscious of my thoughts overall on the trailer and breaking down a couple of things that I did notice that I'm sure many people have already seen anyways. The trailer starts off, with like they're in that cave again, right? There's kind of flashes of all that red, evil, goopy stuff. Zelda seems to fall into a pit. I know people are talking about, oh, what if you like select a character and whoever you select, if you play as Zelda versus Link, they'll fall. No, you know what likely this is, and I think we should just level the expectations right off the bat. What's likely probably happening here is there might be a beginning cutscene for the game. Perhaps what we saw as that initial reveal trailer where Link and Zelda are walking through this cave together, exploring the ruins, perhaps underneath Hyrule. Some sort of accident or mistake happens where Zelda, unfortunately, falls down below into this pit, perhaps getting sealed as well, and it's up to you, Link, to save the day, save Zelda yet again. So I don't know. I think like the metaphor of Zelda falling down a pit kind of just lines things up to basically be like, yeah, we're probably going to be saving Zelda again. But that's to no surprise. I mean, like, that's kind of what every single game in the Zelda series has been about. Would it be cool to play as Zelda? Of course. But I mean, if you really want that, you can always, of course, play Hyrule Warriors, for example, because she's playable there. Of course, I would love to see Zelda playable in a mainline title, but I don't know. I'm just not getting that vibe, and I don't even want to get my hopes up for that until it's actually officially shown off. On one hand, though, I mean, you'll also notice throughout a lot of the shots in this trailer, we don't really see much of Link's face. A lot of the shots are from his backside. Look at the back of his hair, look at the back of his head. Granted, that's from gameplay camera anyways, because that's, the perspective you'll see as the player. But it did give me that weird feeling. It, felt a little odd that for some reason we weren't seeing a lot of Link's face throughout a lot of those later shots in the trailer. Obviously, there was a couple of moments where we did see it. Looks totally fine, but perhaps there's something hidden there. Maybe something happens to Link. We already see that he's got this new Sheikah Slate arm, essentially. This, mechanic arm. Maybe something happens to his face as well. Takes some sort of... is injured some way. Perhaps has some sort of scarring. Maybe some ancient Sheikah tech on his face. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is there mimight be a reason why Link's face is hidden, but at the same time, we did see it earlier in the trailer. So, it could have just been a choice on the developers who made the trailer, but at the same time, I don't know. If just... there was that feeling there's something fishy going on here. The biggest takeaway from this trailer, of course, is the fact that the landscape has changed dramatically. I talked about this many times before when I was talking about the idea of a Breath of the Wild sequel, is that part of the charm, part of the main gameplay loop of Breath of the Wild was exploring the world fresh, not knowing where everything is, that feeling of climbing up a hill, getting a perspective around being, oh, look at these cool areas. Oh, I want to check that area out, see what secrets are going on over there. Perhaps stumbling across a side quest or a secret treasure trove. And the thing when it comes to a sequel of Breath of the Wild is in order to iterate upon that original gameplay formula, you'll need some sort of new area to explore. But this is a great solution. Seeing how the old world's been just ripped apart makes it dramatically different from the original. The beauty of using this dramatic change to the world is that they have the creative freedom to add tons of brand new areas, but also even have some slightly recognizable areas from the previous game, from the first game, and you'd be like, oh man, this is what happened to Kakariko Village. Look, here's the town, here's what happened to that, and you can maybe see a bit of both, but I think in general, the world is gonna feel very different from what we've played in Breath of the Wild 1. Another advantage of this new landscape dramatically changing, and with the addition of all these new floating islands, means there's going to be much more vertical gameplay. What I mean by that is, in the original Breath of the Wild, a lot of the gameplay was horizontal based. How you would navigate the environment in the original Breath of the Wild was all either on the ground or gliding through the air. And that was the advantage of climbing up tall buildings, large mountains, is that you could get a view of the landscape around you, check out cool areas, perhaps find new shrines and stuff, and then you could then glide and traverse across Hyrule to find these cool new secrets. Now the landscape has changed so much more dramatically where new areas that you potentially want to explore not only will be out in front of you and below you, but it might be on an angle above you or even directly on top of you. What's so interesting about this new landscape is that it's going to offer new ways to also traverse the landscape. You're not going to be able to explore these high up areas with the original toolset you got from Breath of the Wild. With the glider, you could only go on a slowly descent downwards, but you could travel very far horizontally. As far as vertical movement, your options were gliding over a path of fire that has the air gusts, or using Rivali's Gale. But as we've seen already here in this trailer, there's a new way that you can dash up into the air and then tunnel through the rock. It is really wild. My immediate first impression makes it look like, oh, maybe this is a new champion's ability or something like that. Maybe this is some sort of special thing. But the more I think about it, this might be a more crucial tool that you're going to need to be able to use to be able to navigate these environments. With so much of the landscape fragmented and floating throughout Hyrule, you're going to need a lot of different ways to be able to get up into the air. And I think the progression in game will complement that idea. Perhaps you start back on the ground level of Hyrule. You'll be exploring some of the old areas and seeing how they dramatically changed and seeing how the ground level has changed since the time of playing the first Breath of the Wild game. And as you progress, as you as Link get more powerful and get more tools, you'll get access to new abilities that'll enable you to go higher in the air. Like, for example, the little dash move that flies you up. To iterate upon that, maybe you then get the ability to go through the walls and climb up into platforms. You'll of course be able to upgrade your stamina and climb higher and higher. Perhaps there'll even be ways to freely fly around the environment. And I think that's a great segue to talk about some comparisons a lot of people have already made. I think there's a reason that Skyward Sword is the next remake that's coming to Switch, and the reason that they're putting so much focus on this game and not announcing the HD remakes that were on Wii U and bringing those to Switch. I think there might be a lot more ties to Skyward than we might realize. People have talked about already before that one Guardian thing, that one big enemy statue, has a lot of Skyward Sword vibes, has a similar kind of aesthetic to the character. A lot of the runes and the artistic carvings and even like the shape of it just feels very Skyward, for lack of a better word. So with that, I think there may be some more ties to Skyward Sword than we may realize here in this sequel. It's no coincidence that one of the opening shots of this trailer was Link falling through the sky, falling through the clouds, which is a near one-to-one replica of the shot that Link would do quite often in Skyward Sword when flying through Skyloft and grabbing a lift on his Loftwing. Could we potentially even see the return of the Loftwings and even the cities in the sky? This game is kind of going to be a merge between the two, where Hyrule down below on the ground floor and these new fragmented areas floating up into the sky, kind of giving you and paving a path up to the land in the sky. Perhaps that might even be the goal of the game, that as you progress, as you get more stamina, as you get more abilities to be able to fly higher and higher. So while the goal of Breath of the Wild 1 was to make your way into the center of the map into Hyrule, this game, on the other hand, could perhaps be a climb upwards to reach Hyrule Castle, which could be at the topmost floating platform of all the ones here in the world. Another thing to think about too, for people who have played Skyward Sword, is that Demise, the main antagonist of that game, was sealed underneath Hyrule Castle. That was the seal that kept Demise from returning of his original form. But now that we've seen that Hyrule Castle is floating into the air, and since we've seen those shots of like some creepy, weird, evil magic in those caves, presumably underneath Hyrule, it could mean the seal that imprisoned Demise might have been broken, so perhaps we may see some sort of return of Demise here in the sequel to Breath of the Wild. I think another thing too to think about with the scale of the world and the dramatic landscape again, we could see some more larger scale boss battle encounters. Kind of building off the idea of when you were able to pilot the Divine Beast in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, iterating upon the final boss from Breath of the Wild, and even something similar to the Imprisoned from Skyward Sword. What if as you progress through the narrative of this game, there could be large boss encounters that'll just walk around or even fly around these floating islands. Perhaps to take them down, you'll be navigating through the environment, climbing up them even to take down weak points. And it's almost got a like kind of Shadow of the Colossus vibe to these boss battle encounters. I don't know, this was me just kind of spitballing, but that could be kind of something they could do since this world would be such on a bigger scale than what we saw in the original. The original was very wide, but relatively flat by comparison to how much more vertical gameplay there will be to this world, because even if the world is the exact same width size as the original game, there's going to be so much more vertically to explore that'll make the world exponentially bigger than what we saw in the original game. But that's a lot of the stuff we saw in the trailer, right? That's a lot of stuff I picked apart and I've been thinking about ever since they revealed that trailer, but there's a couple of things we haven't seen. There's a couple of things that were not shown off in this trailer. For one, there was no shrines or towers. We saw a lot of different viewpoints from the landscape. We saw a lot of really high up areas being able to look afar throughout the world. but there was really no obvious examples of Sheikah Towers or the shrines. And it could mean one of two things. Well, one being perhaps they just didn't have them in the trailer because they didn't want to show them off just yet. Or there could be a reason that we didn't see them at all. Maybe they're taking a different form in this game this time around, because arguably, Sheikah Towers aren't going to nearly do as much benefit for you when this world is so vertical by comparison to the original game, where once you got up really high up in an area, that Sheikah Tower, of course, would map the surrounding area, and then from that tower, you could visually see every single spot that area just barely mapped, and then you could plan out your adventure of that area and explore where you wanted to go from there. A Sheikah Tower in Breath of the Wild 2 isn't going to offer the same benefits to the player, because you could climb up, said tower, right? But some of the areas of that section of the map could be floating above the tower or off in the distance. So really, towers wouldn't necessarily give the same benefit of climbing up. So perhaps there is going to be a new way for Link to update his map while he explores this new world. As far as not seeing many shrines around, that also could be the same thing. Maybe those aren't apparent just yet. Maybe there's going to be a new way, a new kind of challenge throughout the world that's not going to be as obvious as the shrines. There's one shot specifically in the trailer that looked a little interesting, where it was that monster thing hanging from the ceiling, almost kind of giving like mini boss vibes. And as you can see, they're in Link and this boss is in some sort of interior area, right? In some sort of cave or whatever. Could it be potentially a hint of some more traditional-esque dungeon for Breath of the Wild? There's even like a podium in the back that could potentially be like the little slot you click to open the next doors or something like that. I don't want to get too far ahead, but I do know that was something a lot of people and myself really did miss in Breath of the Wild, having those puzzle-based traditional dungeons. And I hope that's something we could see return here in Breath of the Wild 2. But I don't want to get too far into speculation territory about that until we know a little bit more. Another thing we didn't see, though, in the trailer was no NPCs. The only people we've seen so far is Link, Zelda, and Human Ganon, or maybe Demise, or something. We don't really know what it is, but there's something that's theoretically an antagonist because it looks bad and a lot of bad juice energy is flowing out of it. But we haven't seen any towns yet. We haven't seen how this new dramatic change to the landscape has affected the other races that were already established in Hyrule. We have to see the Gerudos, the Goron, the Zoras, the people of Kakariko Village, Hateno Village, and all that stuff, right? There's a lot of people who live in this world, and there's a lot of inhabitants here in Hyrule, and we have yet to see how they've been affected yet by this new dramatic change to the landscape. And I think that's something going to be holding back for a little while, and that'll be a big reveal in a later trailer that we'll see. Same also goes, of course, for the descendants of the champions, the other primary characters throughout the narrative of the previous game. And another thing that was also absent in this trailer was there was no Guardians. Arguably the most iconic enemy in the Breath of the Wild universe seems to be absent right now. And so it makes me curious why they're being held back, for what purpose, and what we could maybe see different about these new Guardians. How are they going to pose just as much as a threat as they did in the original game, and what new abilities are they going to get to make them even more menacing? Perhaps they'll use their long legs as like a helicopter, and they spin and they can fly or something. I don't know. Maybe something so they can also traverse vertically to chase down Link and something like that. That'd be really cool. All in all, this trailer didn't show off too much. It kind of played it really safe and close to the chest, showed off a couple of new things. Admittedly, I kind of felt like the vibe of this trailer, it was good. It was okay, I guess, but it wasn't like insane. It was no, of course, 2017 Breath of the Wild trailer that blew my mind or anything of that sort. I feel like we still don't really understand what the main new mechanic of this game is. We got a couple of very subtle hints here, with what we talked about, with the landscape changing dramatically and how the gameplay will be much more vertical, thus meaning a lot of the movement tools and stuff will be totally dramatically different. As far as the Sheikah Sailors, we've only seen so far a new addition to Stasis, where that camera had that dramatic move, where it kind of slowed down time and threw that boulder at those enemies. And so that, of course, makes me really excited to see how else they're going to iterate on the previous runes from the original game, but also perhaps even introduce brand new ones. I think what I'm trying to say is there's a lot more to Breath of the Wild 2 we definitely still don't know yet. This trailer felt like a very small window, a very small look at the sequel to Breath of the Wild, and they're holding on just a bit longer to really blow our minds. I feel like this was also showed off because a lot of people have just been begging for so long. They're like, oh, we want to see it. All right, they're like, fine, all right, we'll show you a little bit, okay? It's not ready yet. Give us some time. But anyways, what did you think about the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer? Do you feel satisfied finally seeing it after 2+ years now? What are some of your favorite parts of the trailer? But more than that, what new things do you think they're gonna bring? Definitely let me know that in the comments below. And if you found any secrets of your own, I'd love to hear that as well. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big awesome like. And if you haven't already, definitely subscribe for tons more on The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel. We will definitely be playing it and probably streaming it too once the game fully reveals. And we'll of course be talking about it as trailers continue to come out. Be sure to follow me over on my socials as well as join our community Discord. The link to that is in the description below. It's a great place to find friends to play Switch games with, talk about Breath of the Wild, speculate, and we've been having a lot of fun there and talking about all the new games that were shown off at E3 2021. So if you're interested in something like that, definitely consider joining. Anyways, guys, I want to thank you again so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!